California Highway Patrol Officer Don Burt was brutally gunned down while performing a routine traffic stop. Don and his wife, Kristen, had a promising future. Recently married, the couple's first child, a baby boy, would be born in less than 2 months. Tragically, a merciless gunshot to the back of Officer Burt's head shattered their world and echoed throughout a nation. I'm Brian Dennehy, and this is Arrest and Trial.
Homicide Detective Douglas Kennedy of the Fullerton Police Department was one of the first investigators to arrive on the scene.
We got a bad one tonight. We got an officer. It looks like he's been shot 7-8 times, numerous rounds here on the ground. They're taking him to the hospital right now. What we're seeing at this point is it looks like we're missing the patrol unit that he arrived in. We believe the suspect may have taken that car.
When the call comes out that an officer's down, there's a certain feeling that you can't really describe, and seeing the crime scene, it gives you a chill.
What we're seeing at this point is it looks like we're missing the patrol unit that he arrived in. We believe the suspect may have taken that car. We found some keys over here on the ground. They look like they match the suspect's vehicle. We've got a shoe print over here on the ticket. Don't know whether that's from the suspect or from the officer. It looks like he started to write out a citation.
The Highway Patrol knew that Don Burt had made a car stop and that Don Burt was in the process of writing a ticket and storing a vehicle. He had called for a tow truck on the radio, and he had also run a record check on a subject at that time using the radio. Officer Burt's police equipment, his Sam Brown, all the items on his gun belt, his pager, holster, police radio, were all on the ground, kind of surrounding a large puddle of blood, as well as a lot of medical paraphernalia.
We looked at the car. There doesn't seem to be much inside the car, but we noticed in the trunk of the car back here, looks like maybe he might have found some counterfeiting materials. Appears to be some check-making materials, some blank checks, printers, paper, that sort of thing. Additionally, inside the vehicle, looks like there was a can of Sprite in the vehicle. Maybe we have one occupant that's possibly from him. We're not sure. We have some witnesses over here this officer's interviewing. If you'd like to go over and talk to them, we can.
Let's see that.
We had several very good eyewitnesses that saw the car stop actually take place.
This is Detective Kennedy. He's going to be handling the investigation tonight. He'd like to ask you some questions about the crime scene.
So, can you just tell me what you saw?
Well, I saw the police officer approach the car.
The witnesses saw Officer Burt and the suspect talking to each other as the suspect sat in the car. He had taken the keys to the ignition of the BMW and had hooked those keys onto his Sam Brown belt. Witnesses saw Officer Burt searching the trunk of the BMW. They saw him go to the driver's side window again, where he was again talking with the driver of the vehicle. It appeared a small struggle ensued between Officer Burt and the suspect, at which time Officer Burt fell to the ground after being shot directly in front of the BMW. The suspect had initially shot Officer Burt 6 times in the body, and after Officer Burt had gone to the ground, then he walked up to him and fired a 7th shot into the head. The witnesses described the suspect as an Asian, that he was tall, thin, and had a type of spiked haircut.
The downed officer's mother, Jean, and his father, Don Arbert, himself a sergeant and 30-year veteran of the California Highway Patrol, left for the hospital as soon as they heard the news.
So I just thought that I was going to get to the hospital and be able to hold him and comfort him and love him and tell him to be more careful. But when we got to the hospital, Kristen's brother Scott was standing right inside the glass doors when we got out, and he shook his head, and I knew that he was gone.
I just kind of shut down, I guess, as far as emotions. I knew that he was gone. I knew he was never coming back. I just had to carry on for my family.
The only suspect at that time was a name that was completed on the citation, the name of Phu Duc Nguyen, also the name that had been called into the dispatcher by Don Burt.
Early the next day, officers found Phu Duc Nguyen with his brother at an address in nearby Anaheim. Both men were taken in for questioning.
Their stories were obviously checked out, and it was determined that they were not involved in the crime.
It turned out the name Phu Duc Nguyen was an alias given by the killer. Investigators then turned their attention to the BMW. Every square inch of the car was examined for evidence.
Vehicle was processed, and during that, fingerprints ultimately were located on the Sprite can from the center console. There were other fingerprints that were located in the vehicle, and under the driver's seat was a man's wallet, and inside was the identification for a Hung Tan Mai.
A background check revealed that Hung Tan Mai was a career criminal with a 14-page rap sheet. He also shared the lease on the BMW.
We did some investigation on the name of Hung Tan Mai, found out that he had a felony warrant for an assault with a deadly weapon on his girlfriend. Hung Mai had had many arrests in his past and several for violence.
As authorities launched a nationwide manhunt for Hung Tan Mai, California Highway Patrol Officer Don Burt was laid to rest.
There were law enforcement officers from as far away as Michigan, CHP officers as far as the eye could see. Along with family and friends, 4,500 people gathered here to pay final respects to a 25-year-old rookie patrolman who died doing a job he loved.
I wanted people to understand that he was more than just a cop. He gave me a sense of pride and accomplishment, and I wanted to see him grow up to be a man and be a father. I knew he could be a great father because he loved kids so much. And that's probably when I miss him the most. It's when I think about doing things that we never got to do.
Don Burt was given his final farewell. At the same time, thousands of law enforcement officers vowed not to rest until his killer was brought to justice. They knew that anyone who could kill a cop so cold-bloodedly would not hesitate to kill again.
An urgent nationwide manhunt for alleged cop killer Hung Tan Mai was on. Around-the-clock surveillance was set up at Mai's residence and all his known hangouts. But the suspected murderer was nowhere to be found, and his trail was quickly getting cold. Then an unexpected break suddenly led authorities to Houston, Texas.
I need to speak to one of your agents. Yeah, I got some information.
3 weeks after Don Burt's murder, investigators received a call from an informant in Houston who claimed to know the whereabouts of Hung Tan Mai. He wanted protection and a deal. The informant had given Mai shelter in his Houston residence. Now, he feared for his life.
Mai was sleeping on the sofa when the officers initially took the front door down. Hung Mai did struggle with the officers at the time of the arrest, and they were able to subdue Hung Tan Mai. They placed him under arrest and handcuffed him.
Hung Tan Mai was extradited to California and charged with the first-degree murder of CHP officer Don Burt.
Upon landing there, a certain area of the airport had been closed, and a SWAT team had been assembled and was conducting surveillance and security of that area for taking Mai from the airplane to the Orange County Jail.
Assistant District Attorney Mike Jacobs was brought in to prosecute the case. Hung Tan Mai continued to be a threat to innocent lives, even from behind bars.
While he was in custody, Mr. Mai solicited an undercover officer to kill a witness on the state homicide.
Mai wanted to silence the informant. The only way authorities could prevent that was to let him think he had succeeded. They created an elaborate ruse.
We staged an entire crime scene in which it appeared that that subject had actually been killed when he had not. Photographs were done, and those were later provided to Hung Tan Mai.
Hung Tan Mai fell for their phony contract hit, hook, line, and sinker. They moved him to solitary confinement.
Mr. Mai's custody situation is very unusual and unique. He's on a 24-hour surveillance. The only prison official who can have contact with him is the lieutenant or the commander of the watch. His door is painted red to alert anybody of his special situation. He couldn't flush his toilet without having a guard do it. So he has some very unique circumstances.
Law enforcement had won the first round in their fight to bring a cop killer to justice. But their biggest challenge was yet to come, sending Hung Tan Mai to death row.
Hung Tan Mai waived his right to a jury trial and took his case directly before a judge. Mai pleaded guilty to the murder of California Highway Patrol Officer Don Burt. A jury was convened to complete the penalty phase of the trial. They would decide whether Mai would live out his days in prison or pay the ultimate price for his cold-blooded crime.
Hung Tan Mai was led into court, surrounded by 6 Orange County Sheriff's deputies. They would remain by his side during every minute of the proceedings.
He had Martin chains on, which chains your wrists to your waist and also your waist to your legs, and his legs were shackled to a desk.
Prosecutors launched their case with a presentation of physical evidence.
We had the eyewitnesses, fingerprints, we had a footprint near the CHP unit that matched Mr. Mai's shoe. We had the DNA of the officer's blood on his boot. It was an overwhelming case.
Officer Burt's family was present for the entire trial. For them, it would prove to be a painful experience every step of the way.
To see the pictures takes us right back to the night that we were there in the hospital when we found out that he was dead.
From a mother's point of view, is that you never want your kids to hurt, and seeing those pictures, that's the only part that really bothered me, is I know my son hurt.
The proceedings were constantly interrupted by Mai's violent and profane outbursts.
I could see the jurors' eyes just sort of open, and that there's a realization that this is the real thing, and they're going to get a real view of not only what happened, but what kind of defendant this is. From there on, the trial kept that sort of pace. The judge would admonish me, he'd yell something, and we'd keep going. And that's the way the trial proceeded for the next 4 days.
When you look at Hung Mai, I think you see a cold-blooded killer. I was at counsel table when he turned around and looked at the family of Officer Burt and told them that he would do it again.
It got to your stomach because it just refocuses on the night that it happened. I think that you get that gut-wrenching feeling again, that immediate hurt that you felt when you first heard.
At one point, Mai tried to attack a witness on the stand.
Next thing I saw, the water pitcher flying, the desk flying up in the air, and he's somehow trying to make his way, I think, towards the witness, which he can't because his leg is shackled to the desk.
When Hung Tan Mai finally took the stand himself, the jury got a chilling view into the mind of an unrepentant killer.
What Mr. Mai said is, I'm not here asking for your sympathy, and I'm not asking for your mercy. I believe in an eye for an eye, And then he said, the prosecutor, Mr. Jacobs, is seeking the death penalty in this case, and in view of the circumstances that I find myself and the crimes I've been convicted of, I don't see, I have no argument.
After less than an hour, the jury returned with a unanimous decision.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find that the appropriate penalty to be imposed upon the defendant, Hung Than Mai, is death.
When the death penalty verdict came back, I was pleased because I knew that it would limit his ability to kill anybody else. It didn't give me any relief, it didn't give me any satisfaction for what he did to Donnie.
The reasons to justify it.
Before the judge imposed sentence, he listened to statements from Don Burt's family.
There will never be closure for me or our family. Donnie will never be with his family or friends again. We will never celebrate another holiday with him, wish him another happy birthday. Donnie will not see his son grow, hold his wife at night, and I will never again hold his face in my hands, kiss him, and tell him, I love you, my son.
Don's widow, Kristen, spoke for their young son as well.
And the one thing that I will never, ever forgive him for is leaving my son without a father. For every bullet that entered my husband's body and inflicted pain upon him, this convicted felon deserves the death penalty.
Now, Judge Richard Weatherspoon would decide the fate of Hung Tan Mai.
It is the order of this court that you shall suffer the death penalty, said penalty to be inflicted within the walls of the state prison at San Quentin, California.
Hung Tan Mai was later transferred to the Supermax prison in Florence, Colorado, pending an automatic appeal.
My life and my son's life and everyone else who was touched by Donnie is affected until the day they die. Cameron and I are living a life without Don. It's a decent life. It's not happy the way I'd like it to be. Don won't be there when Cameron starts kindergarten. He won't be there when Cameron loses his first tooth or gets his driver's license or gets married and has children of his own. So it's never ending. It goes on forever, and there's no way to have justice for something like that.
He was our only son, and it's like losing an arm. You adjust your life to the absence of something. In this case, it's our son. And you go on with your life. You never heal.
He was my son, and I'll miss him forever. But I wish I could touch him one more time, squeeze him and hold him and kiss him, and say goodbye, my son.
The murder of California Highway Patrol Officer Don Burt stands as a somber reminder of the grave risks that law enforcement officers face every day as they bravely protect our communities.